everybody. Welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. I'm Kelly Hogan, and I was praying and thinking, Lord, just tell me what I should talk about this week. And your email showed up. No joke. So Andrea sent me an email and said, Hey, I would really love to come and talk to you. I've been in your group before, and I have some things that I would like to pass on. I was kind of busy in that moment, Andrea, and so I did something I don't usually do. And I said, So tell me exactly the points that you think people could learn from you. She sent me a list, and I looked at it and I was like, well, thank you, Lord. That's amazing. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for coming on. For those who don't know you yet, Andrea Joy is a certified health coach and mindfulness workplace facilitator, and I very much appreciate that you reached out to me. So the first thing that you wrote was that you had wanted to gain weight on carnivore. Now, I don't hear that too often, but tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, first, Kelly, thank you so much. And honestly, sending that email, I had no idea if you were going to respond, if I'd hear back. I'd been in your group and I knew that you were so warm and friendly and been following you, learned so much. So of course you responded back with such a lovely message, and I just so appreciate being here with you today.
You.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, some of us are rare out there who actually want to gain weight with it. And the reason for me was I had dealt with autoimmune for so many years, and I had COVID so many times. And when I got COVID, I would get a flare up of all the autoimmune. They would all come out, whether it was rashes and joint pain, everything. And it was brutal. And sometimes it took months to recover. And the last time around, which was about a year and a half ago or so, I really struggled to gain the weight back. I lost a lot of weight and got down to 92 pounds, which is crazy. Like, yeah, I mean, I was always like built thinner and smaller, but that was not healthy. And I had issues with my gallbladder and kidneys, and it just affected like everything for me. So it was actually my chiropractor mentioned carnivore, and then I started reaching and came across you and Rebecca Heichman and this whole community of people talking about how much it helped them, and I was just blown away. So I slowly stepped into it probably like 4 months after that, and was having red meat, and then eventually went just full carnivore. And I just fell in love with the fact that I saw it change so quick. It was like 3 weeks in, my cycle came back and it's been regular ever since, which is crazy because I even went to my functional doctor and she's like, we've never seen this. Meanwhile, I'm thinking like, I've heard I've seen people talking about it, but for me, it wasn't even coming from a diet of like bad food. I was eating vegetables, chicken and fish. That was it.
Okay.
Avocados and avocado oil. And so there was no processed foods, there was no seed oils or sugar, gluten, any of that, no dairy. But it was just removing the vegetables that immediately within weeks I got my cycle back, and I've had it ever since. I ended up gaining like about 25 pounds. So just that gave me so much strength, helped my thyroid. Like I felt satiated for the first time in my life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When people have asked, how do I get my period back? How did you fix this? I feel like one is removing the toxic plants.
Mm-hmm.
Two, give yourself all of that amazing fat, like
Yeah.
fatty meat. You said you were eating a lot of vegetables and chicken, so I assume when you went carnivore, there was an increase in overall fat intake as well.
Oh, yeah. So I was vegan years and years ago.
Wow.
So I went from that to like pescatarians, from like vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, keto-ish,
Mhm.
because I couldn't have nuts and seeds and certain things like that. And just eating a piece of meat on like lamb or whatever, I was like, I felt like, is this okay? Like, I've never actually done this. When I did have meat years ago, I would always cut that part off. So,
Right.
yeah, leaning more into fat, I learned like I did end up doing lion for a while as well. And I just really listened to my body. Like it definitely wasn't like a piece of cake, the transition,
Yeah.
but I listened to my body, and it's funny now almost to see like people's expression when they're like, what's that? I'm like, fat. And they're like, you're eating fat? Like just straight fat. I'm like, yes.
I've had people come out and just say, "Oh, I thought that was not good for you." Publix has a deli where everything is cooked,
Yeah.
and they have a big hunk of pork. Sometimes it's mojo pork, which is more seasoned and sauce than I can handle. But they have a plain pork, and I've gone there before and picked that up, and they'll sometimes have this huge side of fat on it, and they
Oh,
want to cut that off and
yeah.
not give it to you. And I'm always like, oh, can I please have that? And I have had so many of the workers there who are look at me and they're like, I didn't think we were. supposed to eat that. Like, oh, well, I'm definitely supposed to eat that.
I know it is. Even with the red meat, I get like, yeah, doing line diet for like 90 days. Are you sure you're supposed to have red meat or that much of it? Like
Right.
it's supposed to be every often. I'm like, well, all my blood work looks okay. You know what I
That's
mean? I'm
right.
healing myself. I'm feeling better. So I do get looks. It's interesting when people kind of like pause and they have to kind of filter and
Yes.
think, should I say something or not? But I don't mind it because I know that when I was vegan, if I would have met a carnivore, I would have been like, what?
Right.
I just didn't know. So most people just don't know. So I don't mind talking about it and just hope that they're, kind of look surprised, but don't say anything too harsh.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think most all of us grew up in the box, right? We weren't thinking outside of the box. We were all in the box. And we were all
Absolutely.
told, eat your vegetables, fat makes you fat, avoid red meat so you avoid, cancer and heart disease. And then at some point you come out of the box, you're like, oh my gosh, my
Yeah,
body is confirming this. It was all wrong. It was just all wrong.
it is. And I still get so eggs, really? That's not like cholesterol. I'm like, eggs really are okay.
They're magical. They're not just okay, right? They're
I
so
know.
magical. Well, as long as people tolerate them. Are you able to
Right.
have eggs at this point?
So in the beginning, I ate everything. I
Okay.
mean, rotisserie chickens, I would get turkey, eggs. I mean, I was like starving. And
Yes.
I was like, oh man, I was really hungry and I was really needing a lot of nutrients I wasn't getting. So in the beginning, I ate bacon, everything. But then over time, the histamine reaction started to come into play for me.
Yes.
So I had to, and even the eggs started to get a little tricky, and I realized I felt better without them. So that's when I did the lion diet for a while. Then I brought back in like wild salmon, I brought back in bison. So I haven't brought the eggs back in. I can't wait to, honestly. But as I heal, I just keep reintroducing more and more foods. But in the beginning, I just went nuts because it was like, I'm so hungry.
Yeah, you're just in the euphoria of
Yes.
nourish. I went through that as well. I didn't do plant-based for long, but I
Mhm.
did, and I'd also done a lot of calorie restriction. So when
Mhm.
somebody finally said, just eat a lot of meat, I was like, okay, yes. And it was great. Yeah. And like you, through that process, I came to start to fine tune and find out, oh, so now that I'm feeling good, it turns out I feel my best when I avoid, and there were times when I was not able to do chicken egg whites. I've always been able to do the yolks, and
Yeah.
duck eggs work well for me. But now I'm back to where I can tolerate the whole egg. So I hope the same for you at some
Thank
point.
you. Yeah, I did do duck eggs for a while. We had a local farm that was fantastic, organic farm, but they closed down.
Oh man.
So I had to eliminate the duck eggs. But yeah, I did okay on those as well. Duck
Yeah.
eggs were great and they were creamier.
Yes.
And on a burger, that was really good.
Yeah, so if anybody's watching, any of you at home, if you don't react well to the whole egg, you could try just the chicken yolk or duck eggs if you're lucky enough to get your hands on some. Or like Andrea right now, just cut them out for a while, let your body do some more healing, and then try bringing them back when you feel good and brave.
And I will say that's been kind of cool to really learn how to listen to my body of what it needed. That even though I saw, especially like when I see other carnivores out there posting pictures of like, 12 eggs and like a steak. And I'm like, maybe in the beginning, but all of a sudden I had this shift about 5 or 6 months in where I just wasn't as hungry anymore.
Oh,
And it
okay.
was really, and I heard that could happen. I was
Yeah.
just like, wow, I'm just not like, I don't want nearly as much. I feel very satiated with a lot less, but I still kept higher fat than protein, and that worked better.
I went through that same thing. The
Oh,
nourish,
yes.
where you start and you're just ravenous all the time. People say, how
Yep.
many calories were you eating? I'm like, all of them. I don't know. It was just
Yep.
all of them.
Yep.
But then after about 6 months for me too, like there was a little sigh of relief where it wasn't like
Yeah.
I wasn't tracking. I didn't try to cut back. I just didn't need as much.
Yeah. I heard that could happen. I was like, no way. The way I'm going, I'm gonna
Yeah.
end up having to buy a couple cows. Like, this is crazy. But it was that all of a sudden it switched, and I was like, I almost thought like, should I do this? Like, this is
Yeah.
okay. Like, I feel like I'm not getting enough, but my body was like, hey, we're good. Like, I feel like I've gotten enough. Now I'll let you know like how much I need. So I just do my best to listen.
So you had been gaining as you needed to. You needed to
Yeah.
gain. But around that point where you felt that little sigh, is that kind of where you started to stabilize weight-wise?
Yeah. So I got down to 92. I probably started around 95 when I started carnivore. I went up to 122.
Okay.
And then I kind of came down over the last month or so to 118 or so.
Okay.
So just dropped down a little bit. And again, I only ever weighed myself just to give me an idea of like,
Yeah.
am I okay with my weight? Am I getting stronger? It was never about the weight loss for me. It was always about strength.
Right.
Like, am I healing and am I strong? Like,
Yeah.
so am I showing any symptoms? Not even like dealing with autoimmune I had severe mold toxicity. It was so bad. I would always get like, we've never seen anybody with this much mold in them. I'm like, that's not something I want to advertise.
Oh,
But there was just so many autoimmune issues that it was more of like, okay, how are my symptoms today? How is my weight? Do I feel inflamed? And I can still remember a moment being at the gym, and it was probably just a few months into carnivore, and I felt like I was the strongest I've ever been my whole life. Just
awesome.
this feeling of strength doing a leg machine. I was like, I've never felt this like sturdy and strong and stable in my body ever. It was crazy.
I
Yeah,
love that feeling. And I
it
think that
is.
comes from nourishing from the inside out, not just obviously progressively overloading. Yes, working
Right.
those muscles. And I'm glad to hear you are doing that too. But that that inner strength of
Yeah.
being fed. That's
Right. And just feeling like stable. Like I think first, I remember somebody called me years ago frail. And I felt it. It was a
yeah.
hard thing to hear, but I'd had my breast implants removed. And after that surgery, I was really frail and I was weak and I couldn't work out. And it wasn't even so much the thin. Again, for me, it was always, I always had people comment on my weight of being so thin.
Mm.
And I was like, that's not a compliment. I want to be strong.
Yeah.
Like, and I want to be healthy. That's
Yes.
true, like vitality. Like, you could be thin and be, not healthy, and you can
Right.
be overweight. So that strength for me was really, really big and still continues to be.
Yes. I think that's the feeling that capable. I'm capable and
Yeah, yeah.
agile and fit, not just skinny, but you
Right.
can also have some of that capable and fit at a wide range of weight, as
Yes.
long
Yeah.
as it's, accompanied by muscle and balance and
Right.
mobility, flexibility. Yeah. I like
Yeah, I felt like my body actually filled out the way it was supposed to be my whole life, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
whether it was my hips, my butt, like everything was like, this is what we're supposed to be like. And I was like, okay, like, yeah. And especially after the breast implants, having those removed, that was a big shift, and losing weight from that as well and going into surgery so sick. So that was a shift too, to really learn to like love and accept exactly who I am. So this was another shift. And I was like, oh, all right, this is where you want to be. We're good.
Yeah. I've heard people say that carnivore is not just a weight loss diet, but it's a weight optimization. So if somebody is nourishing themselves properly, as Dr.
Yeah.
Berry would say, the proper human diet, for some people that means they're going to gain some weight, hopefully in the form of muscle, especially if they're working muscles. And then others will need to drop some weight, but it's a way of optimizing what the body was intended to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Which
like
is
that.
beautiful. Yeah.
It is. And
Yeah.
for me, when I got to the weight that I am now, I didn't suddenly have to go, okay, well, let's add back some carbs so I stop losing weight.
Right.
Because for me, I came to carnivore very heavy. We came from different ends of the spectrum, Andrea. So I did want to lose weight, and then I
Yeah.
did. And some people sort of panic and say, well, do you worry that you would get too small? I'm like, I'm still eating a lot. And then my body
Right.
just settled where it
Yeah.
needs to be. Yeah.
That's exactly how I feel. You just get to a point where it's like, okay, this is where I feel happy. I'll let you know how much food I need. I'll
Yeah.
let you know the weight I want to be at, and we're good. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, it's so different from the old way of thinking of forcing, like
Yeah.
forcing a diet, forcing yourself not to have sugar, forcing yourself not to have this. Instead, it's just listening to your body and doing what it needs to do.
Speaking of sugar, was that a hard thing for you? Did you used to like sugar? I know you said you had been on a pretty clean diet, but has that always been the case?
So I used to joke that I would live inside of a cupcake if I could.
Yes.
So that's how I didn't really have issues with weight.
Okay.
So, which is good and bad. The
Yeah.
bad part of it was I could eat a lot of sugar and was definitely pre-diabetic and did not know it. And would eat tons of cookies and cakes. And it was kind of a joke because in my mind, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't cigarettes. So it wasn't that bad, right? You could just go in the store and buy it. So how bad could it be? So I ate a lot of sugar, like just tons of cookies and cakes. I didn't stop myself because, and I wouldn't say to the point of making myself sick or anything, but I just didn't think about it. I
Right.
just ate and I craved it so badly ever since I was a little girl. And then getting into my 20s and having gut issues and then realizing I had systemic candida. And still, like, I would overdose still on like mangoes and like even fruit. Like, I couldn't stop myself with dried fruit, or the thought every day was, what would I have the next day or that night for sugar? Like, I remember calling my brother one night, he lived close by, and I said, "Do you have any treats or sugar in the house?" And he's like, "It's like 10 o'clock." And I'm like, it was just between the candida and then the sugar cravings and being so addicted to it, it was always on my mind. It was really tough. That was very frustrating. And I just feel like I gave up when I was first told that I had autoimmune stuff 10 years ago. I gave up cane sugar. Like, that was out.
Okay.
I was like, I'm done. Like, that's easy. Alcohol was out, all that. Like, that stuff was easy for me. I wouldn't say easy, but not as bad. I leaned more on the natural sugar still.
Okay.
And even blueberries would cause my gums to swell. Like, so I had so many issues, whether it was honey or even the natural sweeteners or flour. Like, it was like, what could I would create these recipes and find them online, anything with a texture that would give me that. And it was, again, those, like, that first month into carnivore, it just went away. It was silent. It was the first time in my life I ever had peace with it, ever.
Yeah.
It was such a big part. Like, it was joke with friends about my cookies. It was always such a big part of my life, and known for it, as I would have lived in a cupcake if I could have. That it was crazy, and I craved the fat.
Man, that's cool. That
Yeah. And I will say, like, the cravings are huge, but the freedom that comes with it, of like, wow, for anyone that ever dealt with addictions or anything that you were constantly thinking about, to all of a sudden be free of it,
yes.
was like, I was like, it was just freedom. I was let out. And I was like, oh my God, this is what it's like to live like a real life and not always have it on my mind, because it took so much energy out of me. And even the holidays, like this Christmas, past Christmas, I would have been thinking about, what can I make that's still healthy, but has a texture like a pancake, or anything, like anything I could get my hands on. I was like, I'm good. Yeah. Everyone's like, really nothing. I made cookies. I hand them out. Like, the smell of it is nice. And I did notice that as I've gone on, I've wanted some type of emotional soothing. So the cravings are completely gone. There's no desire, but the emotional soothing, or the self-soothing of some sort. Like, I typically, have had a bad day, I would grab the cookies.
Yes.
That was still coming up as like, oh, what do you grab? So I had to create my own toolbox of like, okay, what do I use now to self-soothe? Like, what can still create that feeling of the cookie, since the cookie wouldn't even be enjoyable anymore.
No.
So then I had to create my own tools that learn how to self-soothe, and still take care of myself and feel nurtured.
Do you mind me asking about any of your tools?
Yeah. I feel like it's something I probably started on like 8 years. I work with my clients on, I create this virtual toolbox, and we really find what works best for them. So it takes time to really figure out what helps you self-soothe or even self-parent.
Yeah.
And for me, mindfulness, and we talked a little about this, meditation really helped and calmed me. Coloring, even like an Epsom salt bath, was very soothing and calming to me. So many different tools I kept adding to it. I realized that just walking outside and being in nature.
Yes.
I mean, just especially having a dog is helpful, because you're out in the morning and you're out at night, but just the sunlight. I mean, simple things like that. Sometimes it's just my favorite blankie and a sparkling water. And I feel, and I feel like it's a warm hug. Like, so just finding those things, like journaling has been one of my best friends. I keep a journal next to my bed and near the couch, because if I'm having some type of emotion come up, I get it out. I don't let it sit in and stay within me. Even if it's a piece of paper, whatever I have to get out on, I get it out and kind of work through it, and I feel better immediately.
I agree. All of those are so good. All right, there were like three things that you said that I wanted to come back to. Number one, my mentor, carnivore mentor and friend, Charles Washington, and he
Mhm.
helped me figure out this carnivore thing back in 2009. He used to say only the lucky ones get fat. Now, I do not love that word fat because I was called
Yeah.
fat some, but only the lucky ones get fat. And it makes me think of what you said. people who see it on their body and realize earlier that, oh my gosh, it's the sugar. It's the sugar. We have an outward clue. Yours was all inside and it just looked like you were getting away with it. Meanwhile, of course, insulin is going up and A1C is going up and autoimmune issues are forming. So in a way, I was kind of mad at him the first time he said that. I was like, spoken like somebody who has never had a weight problem.
Yeah,
But now I get it because it's a motivator that we can see and actually do something about. And the second thing you said was how being free from these cravings that occupied your headspace. I went through that as well. And Charles Washington, again, he said, I got to tell you, girl, you're going to need to get a hobby. I was like,
yeah,
what? He said, you have had a hobby. You've had soothing, and it's all been food and it's been
yep,
sugar. And now you need hobbies. You need things to keep you busy, to occupy your mind. You got to find a purpose that's other than this addiction. And
right.
I think that's an important thing for people to hear.
It is because those things, as whether it's yoga or going to the gym, or like I said, like your blanket, your favorite blanket, or putting your favorite t-shirt on,
Yeah.
or an essential oil. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily anything big, but or just joining some type of community, right? For support of something. Community is big. So anything like that, just to help you like self-soothe, because typically we self-soothe with the food, with
Mhm.
the alcohol, with, unhealthy things. So it's learning how do we self-soothe now with things that are actually good for us.
Yes. And people who have addictive kind of personalities, we
Mhm.
can just transfer that off to something else. Hopefully, something so good. I keep saying to myself that I want to be as addicted to time with the Lord as I ever
Yeah.
was with things that were so harmful to me. But, we can move these addictions to things that are good for us and we become passionate because
Yes.
that tends to be, well, we were passionate about sugar. Now we
No.
are passionate about helping people with carnivore. Okay, you mentioned meditation. And when you wrote to me the other day, I don't think I said this, but here's what I was thinking. When people used to say, oh, practicing meditation can really help with addictions, I was always like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I have found some YouTube videos that'll kind of get you to slow down breathing. It'll talk you through the breathing and it's playing some peaceful music and it'll put scripture up to reflect on. Like it's something for me to reflect on. Now, I know that people who are really well practiced with meditation, their idea is clear it all. Be nothing but the breath, nothing but your thoughts. I don't think I'm the only one. I don't know if you've struggled with it, Andrea, but it's like monkey brain, spider monkey, what all over the place. So having that verse up there, and I'll link to a few of those, but what does meditation for you? What is that like?
Yeah, so I think that's beautiful, honestly. I think meditation can be so many different things. It can be getting rid of your thoughts, and it can also bring you closer to God.
Mhm.
And you can fill your heart with God. So, and feel just that more of that connection. Yeah, we're just teaching our brain, like, no, not right now. I
Yeah.
don't have to plan. I don't have to worry. I don't have to do the things. I'm just going to go within and let my body truly relax and calm down, come out of fight or flight, do what it needs to do. And then throughout the day, I like mindfulness even throughout the day of like mindful folding clothes, right? Or doing dishes. I mean, how often like I catch myself doing dishes and my mind goes off and you're thinking something. And then before you know it, you're upset. And you're like, I didn't even get upset. Oh, that thought led to that, led to that. So it's the mindfulness throughout the day too that allows us to stay grounded in that moment and truly appreciate where we're at.
I am starting to come to realize that some of the activities and moments that I really love are
Mhm.
activities that I cannot do or do not do with a phone.
Yes, me too.
Because I will try to get so many things done while responding, while answering, while liking, while scrolling. But the activities like crocheting, I
Mm.
cannot. I
Yeah.
can't. I have to be very focused. And I've started to realize my heart really loves those activities. And I think that's why. Washing dishes, like you're just, you have to just do that one thing.
Right.
And so, even though a part of me is like, oh, I hate washing dishes, but I actually have started to like it. And I think that's why, because I'm not doing other things in that moment.
Absolutely. I've learned to love it because it gives me those moments to remind me What does the water feel like? What does the plate feel like? What do
Mm.
you smell? How are you standing? How are you breathing? So
Yeah.
those moments like that just allow me to have that a few minutes of peace within, even though it may sound crazy, but it's those moments where you really can ground yourself and those things that we're used to doing. Oh, we can do it like it's so easy. We're not even thinking about it. We're off somewhere else because we've done it so many times. But when we use that as like, and I work with a lot of busy professionals, busy moms, and like, I don't have time to
Right.
do meditation or mindfulness or any of that. It's like, what if we weave it into your everyday things and you just notice you're more grounded and more at peace and you're more in the moment?
You know what I think is a good time to do it? Meal time. Not the
Gosh.
family meal, but when you're alone with food, to say, and it is not easy because I think we
Mhm.
all love to scroll and chew. Who doesn't love to scroll and chew? I
I
mean,
know.
if that was like an Olympic sport or a hobby, I'd be like scrolling and chewing. Those are my fave.
I
But but if you make yourself put it away, and you make yourself take that moment, thank you, Lord, for this food. I'm going to sit down and eat. And if you sit there and reflect on the food and breathe for a minute, you can actually feel your mouth start to salivate. And I've been told that is part of switching from the sympathetic fight, flight, freeze to
Yep.
parasympathetic is your body is now ready. You're salivating. You're ready to digest. And
Mhm.
then you eat in this calm state of like enjoying the food. Have you given that much thought? That kind of thing?
Yeah, so that was part of actually my training was I learned mindful eating. I
Oh,
actually became, yeah, it was so when I became a certified mindfulness facilitator, we had to take the class as a student and then we had to become a teacher. And we had to practice a day of silence, which was very difficult, and mindful eating. And that was the biggest thing is taking 3 deep breaths slowly before you even start eating, looking at your plate, feeling gratitude for it, right? That salivating, and you've got digestive enzymes prepared
yes.
and ready for like, we're ready. And then really chewing and like, what do you taste? How does it even feel? Like I've practiced that with people. Like, what colors do you see touch your food? What does it feel like? We just don't do that. And we're
Right.
so quick to eat, like you said, and scroll, scroll. So that looking at the plate, looking at the food, looking at the colors, feeling it, feeling gratitude for the fact that what we do have, especially like when I'm eating grass-fed meat, and I feel so lucky to have that, and feeling full and like really being mindful of, am I full? Am I not? Like, again, it's usually watching something or scrolling and you're like, oh, I was full like a few minutes ago. I just kept eating and eating. Or I'm still hungry, you know what I mean? Or let me take, like, I really like taking a break and just putting for some reason when I started carnivore, I wanted to eat with my hands a lot. Like
Me too. I'm
yeah,
very tactile now with my food.
like out in the wild.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So the forks are gone.
Yeah.
But putting my hands down for a minute and just saying like, just take a breath.
Right.
And how do you feel right now? And let your food digest because usually after the age of 35, that's when the digestive enzymes have a difficulty. We start to break down the acid in our stomach and we start to get, deal with any type of issues in our gut, like the bloating, poor digestion,
Yeah.
and the acidity in our gut. So that's when the mindful eating is really, really big because when we're in fight or flight and we're eating, it's really hard to digest. It's really hard to absorb those nutrients.
And I love that you mentioned the enzymes in our saliva, in our mouth. The longer
Mhm.
your food is there, the
Yes.
less work your gut's gonna have to do. So like
Yep.
chew, my friend Danny Conway, she encourages people to like if you have to put a note where you eat, like breathe, slow down,
Yep.
chew thoroughly. She says chew until it's completely disintegrated. And I tend to eat not just like a hyena whose other hyenas are about to show up. And so it's like, go now, now, now. But it's
Yeah.
like, stop, breathe, chew really thoroughly. Hey, you mentioned stomach acid. I
Mhm.
see a lot of people who think they have too much stomach acid. They've been told they have too much stomach acid. They're taking antacids.
Yeah.
And yet, I think it's much more the other problem. We're low on stomach acid, don't you?
Absolutely. I've seen that too, where people have taken too much of it, and then it's a really hard time to recover in the stomach to produce acid, which we need to break. I think it's that high, low, what's normal. And I think some people think, do I really even need it to digest my food? But stomach acid is so important. It's finding that optimal level. And I do feel like it's usually on the low end. It's not high for most
Yes.
people. Yeah. So and we briefly discussed this, there's a test that I recommend people. And if you have major issues like ulcers and stuff, you have to be mindful of doing a test like this. But a quarter teaspoon and about 4 or 5 ounces of water. And you drink it in the morning on an empty stomach around
A,
no medications.
a quarter teaspoon of
Of baking soda.
a quarter teaspoon of baking soda in how
Mhm.
much water?
About 4 to 5 ounces of water.
4 to 5 ounces. Just drink it down.
Yep.
And you said in the morning?
In the morning, empty stomach around no
Okay.
medication or anything.
Okay. And what are people looking for?
So what's happening is that the baking soda is alkaline and then you have acidity. So you're looking for a chemical reaction, which is a burp.
Oh.
Yeah.
So if they burp soon after drinking it, that's a good sign.
So if you burp within a minute, it means you have high acidity in that
Oh,
first minute. Optimal is around 2 to 3 minutes-ish. Some people say 2 to 4. That's
okay.
normal. And then anything over that, like 3.5, 4 minutes or so, you want to put a timer on.
Okay.
Anything over that 3.5, 4 minutes means it's low. And some people don't even burp at all because it's so low.
Okay. And if they do run low, do you recommend or ever utilize? Now, listen, I'm not here to give any medical advice, right? I mean, this is not a medical advice channel. We are not your doctor, okay?
Yes, thank
I
you.
am, yes. Um, in your experience with yourself, let's just go with that.
Yeah, thank you.
HCL, is that something that you find to be helpful?
That is probably one of the biggest ones that I recommend. It is very helpful. And again, I'd recommend for people, even if you don't do the test, because I think we all really need help breaking down food. So it's the hydrochloride. It's HCl hydrochloride. That's really helpful. You can find that in a lot of digestive enzymes. I also took ox bile as well when it comes to the fat or lipase. But apple cider vinegar for some people, like about 30 minutes, a teaspoon or so in water, always in water,
Yes.
30 minutes before you eat. Sometimes lemon water is helpful for people. Dandelion tea it can be very soothing and helpful for it as well. So there's lots of things. It's finding what works best for you. For me, it was taking those digestive enzymes to really break it down. And the mindful eating. Last year, they wanted to remove my gallbladder, and I was like, no way. So honestly, the biggest digestive enzyme helped for sure. But I think the biggest thing that helped me was the mindful eating and just pulling myself out of fight or flight, slowing down, enjoying the food, breathing before,
Yes.
taking deep breaths before even stopping. And I didn't really have an option. It was that or surgery. So it was one of those things where I really leaned into it. But yeah, if your acid is low, definitely lean into mindful eating and calm down and slow down. Try not to eat while you're driving, while you're at your desk. Even I work with a lot of people in the workplace. So if you're at your desk, just close the laptop and look away, like
Yeah.
just for 10 minutes, and be mindful of how long you're eating. You'd be surprised how, like you said, we eat so quick, like really watch and try to, each time maybe you're eating in 5 minutes and take 10 minutes to eat and then maybe 15 minutes and really try to slow it down because that I think is the biggest factor along with the other things like the apple cider vinegar, the lemon water that you can do.
Andrea, I was just looking over the list of things that you said have been really helpful to you, and you included sleep. And I think for anybody that's experienced healing, I hear that so much. Like nutrition is important, but sleep. So either talk to us about why it was so important or how you fixed it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that we overlook and we kind of just assume, at least when I owned an insurance agent before I became a health coach. So I had an agency for almost 15 years and I got really burnt out and sick during it. And I think it was that mentality of like work harder
Yes.
and push yourself and keep going and like you'll sleep later and like you don't need it. And it's interesting how that's like just so acceptable and then realizing as I got into being a health coach, understanding the body of like, that's when we repair and heal.
Yes.
That's when our hormones balance out. Like our memories can literally be stored incorrectly if we don't get proper sleep, which
Mhm.
is crazy.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just understanding like our body goes into construction, puts on its little hard hat at night, and it's like, okay, I'm going to try my best to fix everything, adjust, store things.
Yeah.
And if we don't get that proper sleep, we're usually running on caffeine the next day or sugar to
Yes.
kind of keep us going. So for me, it was honestly this year was a big goal to go to bed earlier. It was like a 10 to 10:30, sometimes 10:30, and I could feel the difference if I went to bed at like 9:45 versus 10:15. I
Uh,
could feel it in my body the next day. So I listened and kept moving it, slowly, right? Because the idea is if you're going to bed at midnight and you try to go to bed at 9:30, it's just not going to happen.
yeah.
It's just not. So it's being kind to yourself and saying, all right, I'm going to try 11:45
Uh,
and then 11:30 and moving it up and seeing how you feel. And I would almost guarantee everyone's going to feel better. You're going to feel more awake, less maybe dependent on caffeine. Well, I've never had a cup of coffee in my whole life, I have to say. I know.
wow. Okay. You don't hear that too often. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
But I ran on sugar.
I
So,
see.
so I had the bagel for breakfast or whatever. So I always had the bread and the flour that really did the same thing. So for me, sleep is, I call it the power down hour. When you put your kids to bed, they go in their jammies, they brush their teeth, they read them a book, they turn the lights off. But like, we don't do that for ourselves. We're typically holding the phone up right up until we fall asleep in
Yes.
front of the computer, watching a movie like overstimulated, the lights are bright in the house. We maybe have our jammies on if we're lucky. You know what I mean? We haven't really got into this power down of like, I haven't had a TV in my bedroom in probably 20 years.
No, me neither.
Yeah, that blue light, that overstimulation. So, that's so important. So, really creating just like you would for a child, parenting yourself of like, what do I need to get comfy? Is it a cup of tea and my blankie and like turning the lights down a little bit and maybe shutting the TV off about 30 minutes before I go to bed and doing some journaling or reading and just creating that nice power down hour so your body, you're not expecting it to immediately shut off after all the stimulation.
Yeah.
And then really seeing each night when you go to bed a little bit earlier. I love when people say, I'm not a morning person. I was like, I was never a morning person.
That's right.
But you get to create whatever you want. And I slowly started to create that where I was going to bed early because I felt better. I knew my body was restoring and getting stronger. So in that time, I just kept working at it little by little. Nothing, I like what you said. It wasn't about trying harder. It's just really being consistent and not giving up. And if you do fall off a little bit, that's totally okay. And honestly, common and normal. And then just going right back at it the next day and just keep trying and trying.
I like that. I saw a reel or a TikTok or I don't know what it was of this lady who was acting, but she said she's just so sad. And this other lady walks up and goes, "What's wrong?" And the first lady's like, "I dropped my habit." And the other lady's like, "Okay, well, it's right there. Just pick it up again." And it
Oh,
was like a little lovey on the floor, like a
yeah.
little stuffed bunny. And she looks down and she's like, "Just pick it up again? Yeah,
Yeah.
just pick it up again." Right?
Yeah.
Instead of just bemoaning all the days you missed or, "Oh no, pick it up again." So in my groups, we do, you can commit to, well, obviously you don't have to commit to anything, but a lot of people choose one or two, sometimes up to five things that they want to commit to just for that month. So I
Mhm.
think a beautiful one would be, what is your normal bedtime right now? If it's 11:30, what if you made it for this month 11:15? Like
Yeah.
just a small bump. And if you were to mess up a few days, pick it up again, right?
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah. It's that self-compassion we would give to somebody else, where we'd say to them, it's okay to start again, but giving that to ourselves of like, hey, why don't we do it in a very small way to be kind to ourselves? And what if we stop and we just say, that's okay,
That's
pick it
okay.
up again?
Yeah,
Yep. I love that.
I do too. It
Yeah.
seems so obvious, but the way they had acted that out was just, I don't know, it stuck with me. Do you
Yeah.
do any blue blockers or mouth? A point up here because they're usually on top. Oh my gosh, where's my blue blockers? Okay. Blue blockers or mouth tape or any of that been helpful to you, or more just like the routine of calming things down, dimming lights?
Yeah, I have done the blue blockers. It's been helpful. At first, I was kind of questioning, is this really going to make a difference? That I really do feel that's a huge help because if you're watching, which is nice at night to watch a movie, right, or something,
Yeah.
or just kind of for me, it's always something funny. Like I
Yes.
realized, like the more aware I became, and the more I was pulling myself out of flight, out of fight or flight, into out of stress mode, into rest and repair. that when I'd watch like reality TV shows or something, they were arguing how it affected me
Yeah.
so much. So yeah, so watching those things at night that really bring laughter and protecting myself from that blue light, it affects your circadian rhythm. It can really, and I don't think, again, it's like with sleep, feel like we're so used to like doing it, we don't realize how much it's affecting us until we shift it. And the mouth tape I have purchased, but I have yet to put, I got good advice to put it on during the day first to get
Yep.
used to it.
That's right.
And then, because I'm like, it's kind of freaking me out, but it's my next step of trying the mouth tape because I've heard wonderful things about it.
Oh, I'm excited. If you try it, let me know.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of people in the groups. There's some that do not mouth tape. I want to just throw that out there. It's not like a requirement. You're going to eat meat and tape your mouth shut, everybody. Uh, but I frequently hear that the two biggest things that changed people's health were those two: eat meat and mouth tape at night. Because all night long, we're just getting this subpar oxygen and our nitric oxide levels come down, and it's not good for our dental health or our facial structures. Now, my husband is a natural nasal breather.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and some people say, "Oh, I think I am too." But if you don't have somebody laying there to confirm that, you really wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it affects the bacteria in our mouth. I go to a biological dentist and they were like, they can test it to see what
Oh,
diseases you're likely to get by the bacteria in your mouth. And that's when they said, like, hey, you definitely need to do mouth tape. But they also actually recommended, which is kind of funny, a mouth expander to help where my mouth is actually where the tongue is placed when I'm sleeping at night. That has a big effect on it. So there's so many factors like that that go
oh,
into it that you're right, it is really important. And that mouth tape, it's something inexpensive that we can do to really help.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
practice suctioning. I think I got this from like Michaela Peterson's podcast. Put my tongue up against the roof of my mouth as I'm powering down for bed. If
Mhm.
I'm gonna, especially in the early stages of mouth taping, I had to really practice for a little while because if I just taped up and laid down, I felt like claustrophobic. I wasn't
Yeah.
used to breathing through nostrils, but I had to practice putting my tongue against the roof of my mouth and taping up and allowing myself to breathe. And of course, you'll have to go back and take it off when it's time to brush teeth or talk to your husband, but just practicing when I'm alone during.
Right.
Well, now I've been mouth taping, I want to say it's come maybe 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a really long time.
Yeah.
Game changer for me.
Yeah.
Andrea, I used to snore and drool and then get cotton mouth and I was stuffy all the time. And it helped with a lot of those things. So,
Yeah. I've had the stuffy, the drooling for sure. I get up. I'm like, what's wet? I'm like, oh, that's me.
yep, that's me. That's right. And I used to talk all night. My husband would be like, "You
Oh,
said some
that's
crazy things." And finally I was like, "I better tape my mouth shut."
keep that to myself. That's for
That's
me.
right. You don't need to know. No. Talking about sleep, I jotted down two notes. One was I used to literally say the phrase, "Well, I guess I'll sleep when I'm dead." And I didn't mean like sleep as in there wouldn't be eternity. I just mean rest. I would work, like you said, all day was just go, go, go. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Ha ha. And then things start to catch up to you and you're like, okay, we need to prioritize this. This is important. Food, so important. You and I, we're nourishing ourselves with all this wonderful meat. We're keeping out the toxins. We're hydrating. We're going to get to that in a second. But the sleep piece is huge. So no more folks with this whole I'll rest when I'm dead thing. We need to rest now or you might get that rest a little sooner than you want, right? Like,
Yeah, I was told that a lot when I was younger. Same thing, that same thing. And I just thought that doesn't seem right.
no.
Yeah, and and that's what leads usually leads to burnout with people
Yeah.
because they're leaning on that sugar and that caffeine. They're not sleeping. They're sleeping like 3, 4 hours a night, 5 hours a night, which is not good. Like optimal is like trying to get to that 8 hours. Some people can do a little bit less, some people a little bit more. Again, it's listening to what you really need. But you're right. It's just that mentality of like, oh, later I'll get sleep. And it's like, no, like you said, we're nourishing ourselves in so many ways with the meat. Why wouldn't you nourish yourself at night as well?
Yes. We can't make dopamine without sleep. Like it's
Right?
essential. And
Yep.
and people in studies tend to eat way more in overall, but tend to make far poorer choices the less sleep they get. So like it boosts our happy decision making.
Absolutely. Cravings, my sugar cravings were already really bad. But on the nights I didn't get good sleep, my body was like, we need fuel. You've been
Yeah.
given us sugar. Like the cravings were even worse. So that really helps with the cravings that people are still getting the cravings. That proper sleep allows your body to not look for that and instead just get adjusted to the fat.
Makes total sense to me. And you mentioned wanting to see something funny before bed. I have that rule at our house. If we watch anything dramatic or sad, it can't be the last thing we see. And I've been that way with the kids too. And we'll put on like one episode of Bluey as a palate cleanser. If any of you know
So
what Bluey
cute.
is, it's just the happiest, sweetest little kid show, but it's also appealing. I think even to more mature audiences, it's just so
Yeah.
sweet. I've had many people say this, but just this week, a friend said that she loves to fall asleep and unwind to true crime. And
Oh,
I'm just like, and I feel like that's so common. We're just staring at blue light. In fact, we look into the close blue light while watching the far away blue light of crime and how people are murdered. And we're like, I don't know why I don't get good sleep.
I know. And you know what's it's funny, it's that whole the familiar, right? So we're in stress mode all day and that kind of feeds into it and it's familiar. Doesn't mean it's good for us, but it's
Oh.
familiar.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. We're so used to being on edge that when we actually relax and smile and laugh and
Hmm.
crochet and talk, it feels like, what is this?
Right. It's why the scrolling feels so good too. It feeds into that. I
We
know.
think the scrolling feels relaxing, but when they test cortisol levels, this is actually stressful to our brains, and
Yep.
that's how we unwind before bed.
Yep. It's that constant something different and that like that monkey brain. And then
Yes.
that's why it can be even harder to do the meditation, the mindfulness, because your brain's like, wait, something different, something new, something on edge, something stressful that's so used to that, craves it, and it's familiar. And then when you really do start to do that shift, though, that's what I started to feel like these shows don't make me feel good. Even
No.
if it's like an inspirational show, but it's got a little bit of drama in it, I'm like, oh, not before bed. I have to see it in the daytime. Like,
We go to sleep happy around here. Happy,
yes.
yeah. Okay, let's do a quick review. We talked about how you got rid of your sugar cravings, about using mindfulness, Epsom salts, affirmation therapy, self-soothing techniques, nature and journaling, chewing, mindful eating, chew until disintegrated, focus on the beauty and the taste and textures of our amazing carnivore foods. The
Mhm.
benefits of cutting out all of the plants and toxins and junk and really nourishing and listening to what sits best with our body, which for us, it's meat. That's right.
Mhm.
Sleep, the idea of once our brain is free from all of that addiction and cravings and obsession about replacing it with happy, healthy hobbies and activities that are good for our body. How you got your period back after just 3 weeks of carnivore. Oh, the stomach acid part was awesome. I think that's going to be helpful for people.
Yeah,
And how a Christian or just somebody working on health could use what does meditation mean for us?
right.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
and I think that's big. I find a lot of people, the groups I work with too, that will say, well, I'm a Christian, I really don't meditate. So it's really understanding that there are scriptures about meditation.
yes.
There are passages. So understanding that it's okay to do it a little differently, but still be able to go within and create that stillness and that peace, which is important.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
never stop and listen, like even if the Lord were speaking to us, how would we?
We
We,
wouldn't.
we
This
wouldn't
is like when our
know.
bodies speak to us. We don't even know how to listen. People say, well, how do you listen? It's like we're so busy rushing from one thing to the next and all these thoughts going crazy that we don't know how to really listen.
And if somebody watching doesn't know how to do that, seriously, I'm going to link to a few really beautiful meditations. I know it seems funny like you're going to use YouTube to meditate, but if you're new to it, I think it can be a very lovely way with whether it's the nature sounds and the music, but scripture on the screen and somebody reminding you to breathe slowly and deeply. And then a lot of these videos will allow long pauses between
Yes.
the listening time of just reflect on the scripture, pause, and what a nice thing to do either first thing in the morning or before a meal if you're struggling with digestion or before bed. Also, while accompanied by all of this amazing meat that we're eating.
Yes.
I very much have enjoyed this conversation, Andrea, and I think there are a lot of cool, powerful takeaways. So thank you for reaching out to me this week.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for getting back to me. It's beautiful how those things align like that. And you think, I'm just going to reach out and see where it goes. And we're
At
able
the
to have,
same time you hit send, I am praying about what the next video will be, and it just showed up, and I was like, oh, let's
that's
do
a
this one.
beautiful thing.
It
Yep.
is a
That was,
beautiful
you listened and it was answered quickly.
yes. And thank you. Thanks for being part
Yeah.
of that. All right, I'll
Yeah.
talk to you
Thank,
soon. Thanks,
okay.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.